And okay, I see that we live. I think let's just give people like 1 or 2 minutes, Fiona, before we actually start.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I can see your screen share.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just give everyone a couple of minutes just to...
Okay.
You want to start? Okay.
Good afternoon, viewers. This is Fiona Beale, representing SchoolNet South Africa, welcoming you and thanking you for tuning in to SchoolNet's first webinar of the season using Google Hangouts on Air. The title of today's webinar, as you can see, is How to Integrate Augmented Reality Successfully into Your Classroom by Ronelle Klinck. We're very fortunate to have Ronelle presenting for us today. She's from South Africa and she has obtained her master's degree in ICT. Currently, she's the EdTech coach at St Stithians School in Johannesburg. So over to you, Ronelle.
Thanks, Fiona. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to share what I've learned about augmented reality and using it in my classroom specifically. And I'm going to go into my presentation. And so hopefully you can't see me anymore and you can just see the presentation. Right, so just basically what we're going to be covering today. We'll start with why I wanted to share this augmented reality experience with you. And then for those of us who don't know what augmented reality is, I'll give you a couple of examples. And then the most important aspect would be how to plan using AR successfully in your classroom. And that's really what this webinar is about today. So I was doing my master's, and also at my school environment, I'm responsible for staff development. And I wanted a way to engage both the staff as well as the learners. And I found augmented reality sort of met those needs because it's interactive, it's authentic, but it also engages learners in learning or their learning opportunities as well. So if you look at it, how do teachers incorporate 21st century skills in their classrooms? And those kinds of skills with collaboration as an example, and sharing information with each other would be an example as well of 21st century skills. But things that are interactive, engaging, all lends itself to 21st century skills. So this is really just about my experiences and what I'm going to share with you with what works with augmented reality in the classroom as well. Okay, so for those of us who don't know what augmented reality, just by definition and in very short definition, it's the integration of digital information with the user's environment in real time. Now, having said that, augmented reality is very different to virtual reality. Virtual reality is a simulated environment. So you create this wonderful experience. If you want to do practice, for example, you were studying to be a pilot or whatever, you could use virtual reality to create or simulate that environment. But augmented reality takes virtual reality a step further, because it merges the virtual reality aspect with the real world, with the physical world. And that's what excites me about augmented reality. And I think also from the learner's perspective, and what I've seen as well, they love the fact that they can engage with learning tools or information that you've given them, using digital information as well, and just marrying the two, virtual reality as well as the physical world. So that's a definition, and I'm going to give you a whole lot of examples so you can see what augmented reality really is. So the first image that you are looking at is, this is in a shopping mall, and if you had your device, whether it be a tablet or a smartphone, and you overlaid your device over an object, you would then simulate or get more information about that product. So as a business, you could do things like stock take, etc., and get more information. But as a consumer or a customer, walking around in a store, you could use a device to get information about additional features for a product. You could get the price. You could compare prices. It could also give you information like surveys and stats and so on as well. How many people have bought the same product or a similar product? What other stuff have they bought? So there's lots of information that you could incorporate into one aspect. And as you can see within this image, the information is overlaid, and the trigger is the app that you're going to be using. So I'll talk about that later. There's lots of apps out there that lends itself to using augmented reality. And I'll share what I've used as well and what works. So another example, so if you look at the example that I'm showing you now with augmented reality, so this is a street view. So once again, you could be using your device, and you may be a tourist traveling overseas, etc., and you overlaying or getting more information. Interesting to note, if you look at the information on the left-hand side, it also indicates some crime statistics. So it says a robbery happened 18 days ago. So those are the kinds of things that augmented reality, it could make awareness, but it also could, make us all anxious. And lots of people also talk about your privacy settings around augmented reality, because sometimes there's information that you don't really want to share with people. It obviously, just like anything in any ICT aspect, it does have its pros and cons. So it's providing additional information. Okay, so this is a lovely example again of how augmented reality is superimposed in a room. So you've got an empty room, and you'd like to know if the office furniture is going to fit, if the color scheme is going to work with your existing architecture, be it the carpet or the walls or whatever the case may be. So that's another way that augmented reality could be used, like for your decor and that sort of thing. Another example would be what you see now is your infrared calculator. So you could use your hand and impose something onto your hand where you can actually do some calculations. And you can see on the palm of this person's hand, you can actually see the figures or the amounts on the left-hand side as well. So once again, another example of the use of augmented reality. So these are all real-life examples, something outside of the classroom that makes learning more authentic. So the example that you see here, once again, lends itself to a natural science classroom, life sciences, etc., and looking at the anatomy of the human body. And once again, you could look at so many things. You could look at the bone structure, etc., the nervous system, and the triggers could be anything that you'd like to create. So the triggers could be information on different websites, or it could take you to different videos, etc. So what augmented reality allows you to do is to use an array of media. So it could be video, print, etc., that you're incorporating into augmented reality as well. Okay, so augmented reality, well, it started long before 1997, but what I liked about this study specifically, the survey identified how one would identify if something is AR. If it combines the real and virtual world. So I spoke about the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality. So if it's an interactive in real time, and I think everything these days, especially our learners, are all looking for things that are interactive and engages them in real time. And so that's how another way that we could engage our learners as well. And then augmented reality is not just a 3D, or it's not just a static image, it's a 3D superimposed video, or something, bringing something to life. So those are the characteristics which I find quite useful, because there's so many apps out there, and this is something that you could use in order to decide whether something is valuable and if you could use it in your classroom. So another example of augmented reality here, you can see wearable augmented reality, and this is really the future. The father of AR, Stephen Mann, talks about the fact that later on we no longer going to need, or smartphones are going to become obsolete, but I don't think that's the case. I choose to differ from that. But what augmented reality could do, or wearable augmented reality could do in the future, it could then take away things like a need for a keyboard or a mouse. And here you can see a construction site where someone is wearing wearable AR, and what they could be looking at is an image, for example, of what the building is going to look like once it's been constructed, etc. So in other words, you're creating a simulated environment again, superimposed in your physical environment. Okay, so this is really what's happening in social media with regards to augmented reality, and it's really, really so relevant these days. So on Snapchat, you have these 3D stickers that everyone's laughing about and engaging, and it's just a fun way to have to engage people. Especially if you're a celebrity, etc. You can see there we have celebrities using the 3D stickers in Snapchat, and then lots of 3D emojis, etc. that you can play around and superimpose on different figurines and so on as well. This is a huge buzz at the moment. My school has also released some information about Pokemon Go, just because of the dangers around it, and learners navigating into areas where they shouldn't be, or if they're unsafe, etc. And then also the privacy settings on Pokemon Go as well, and just being aware of that as a parent. But there's so much fun to be made with Pokemon Go as well, and there's so many interactive experiences that you could expose your learners to as well. So I'm coming back to why I started with augmented reality in the classroom, and why I wanted to engage our staff in it. So how do teachers incorporate 21st century skills in their classrooms? And this is just merely my suggestion about how I've used AR and how I've been successful in doing so. So the first thing I looked at is AR interactive? So I wanted to take my learners as well as the staff on an interactive journey. So something that would be exciting, something that would be different. And I love what John Hattie says: as a teacher, you need to know thy impact. So he uses the word thy, intentionally, just to know that as a teacher, whatever tool you're going to be using in your classroom, use it meaningfully. Don't just say, well, today, instead of showing you pictures on the board or whatever it may be, or visuals, I'm going to show you a video. because that's not an interactive adventure. When you want to look at your impact and why you want to use AR in the classroom, think about why I want to use it. Is it going to do the following? Because are you substituting it for another tool? So could you just have given them a worksheet or a handout or something like that that would have got you through the material quite quickly? Then it's not necessary to use AR in that case. What I would then suggest is maybe to use these characteristics to decide whether or not AR is relevant to what you'd like to do in your classroom. Is it going to enhance the learner's understanding? So if learners are battling to understand how the nervous system works, for example, or they, battling with some concept, like I'm looking at Google Maps, which is wonderfully AR and interactive, etc. So think about how the tool that you're going to be using is going to enhance your learners' understanding. Transform the learning experiences. And what I mean by transform, is it going to be something that learners will you take them from the unknown to the known quite quickly using AR? So think about ways in which you can transform their learning opportunities as well. Engage and excite all learners. We all have those learners that you are so challenged by them because they're not disinterested. How do you get them engaged? And in this way, this is another tool that you can use or support yourself implementing engagement in your classroom and creating that interactive adventure in your classroom, because learning should be fun. And I see AR, especially when we get to the next step in terms of scaffolding the use of AR in your classroom, by referring to Abdul Kalam's statement about first attempt in learning. So that's what failing means. And we also need to create opportunities for our learners to fail, safe environments for them to fail. And I think augmented reality is a nice way of doing that in your classroom, because they have a safe space to learn something and there's no consequences, or they're not going to be harmed in any way. So it's a nice way for them to fail and learn from those failures as well. It's also another life skill that you're teaching them. So that was one of the first things that I did in terms of my augmented reality experience. Is it an interactive adventure? And then I went ahead and used these characteristics. Okay, so how do you create these interactive adventures? I said I'd be giving you practical or sharing practical examples with you today. So this interactive adventure could be through the use of overlaying or providing cues in your classroom where learners will they'll go ahead. You don't even need to tell them. As soon as they see an image, etc., they're going to be curious. And you could say to them, well, today we're going to create, we're doing something on, for example, the nervous system, or something in geography or whatever. And you could provide that information upfront, but I'll talk about how you're going to flip your classroom. But you can see even in the images that nobody's looking towards the teacher. It's interactive. They're engaging with the device, with each other, etc. And that's why it's an interactive adventure. So lots of places these days, and Science Borono Discovery Center is another example where you have these virtual museums, or a physical museum incorporating virtual elements as well of augmented reality. It also creates an interaction with people, and it makes the learning more exciting, etc. So that's another example of how it's being used, not only around the world, but within South Africa as well. Okay, so which brings me to the second step. So you've decided now that this AR is going to be interactive. The second thing would be, are you using AR to scaffold your learning? And scaffold learning is something so fantastic in the education environment, because it's really a way for us to support our learners. So if you see that there's someone in your classroom who's really battling with something, you could use augmented reality to assist them and scaffold the learning opportunities that you need to provide. It also could be a way to provide feedback in terms of the learning new material as well. And I'm going to take you through some examples of how I've done that as well. And then learners take a more active role in their own learning. So it's not about teachers just standing in front of a classroom and explaining how something works. It's now about you engaging with the material. Here's the device, and then go and discover. And experiential learning is another buzzword that we speak about so often these days. Learners share the responsibility of teaching and learning. So it's not just about the teacher doing lesson plans or preparations. You could even take it a step further, where you ask your learners to create an augmented reality experience for the other learners, or it could be a group involvement as well. You could scaffold learning to move learners beyond the current skill and knowledge levels. So you know where your learners are, at which point they are, and you can then slowly scaffold their learning towards something that you want to achieve with a lesson or whatever the case may be. And then lastly, with regards to scaffolding learning, learners are able to take ownership of the learning event. And that's important to empower our learners as well. So I'm going to give you some practical examples of scaffolding. So an example of what I like about scaffolding, using an element like a field trip or providing information. You could even do this in a school environment. So here I've got a picture of a school, or it could be a museum, etc. And the markers are indicated in red, or the triggers. And if the kids or the learners put their device over those triggers, it could trigger essential cues or information about how they could do a scavenger hunt, or it could be just the fact that you wanted them to gain all these experiences and learn different information about a certain aspect. But once again, they're not sitting in the classroom, they are walking around, they're finding these cues, and they're finding the information that engages them in a different way. So science expos are a fantastic way to bring learning to life. So usually at a science expo, you've got this beautiful cardboard, and people have explained certain things and their problem statement and what the investigation is. Augmented reality could be incorporated within your science expo environment as well, but bringing images to life. So you could ask people to download an application that has augmented reality built into it before the expo, and they can then come with their device, and whatever's on that particular cardboard could then be brought to life, like the heart rate, for example, as you can see in the image over there. So scaffolding your learning and intentionally doing so. What I love about scaffolding with augmented reality as well, some learners don't need to be told there's a certain sequence that you need to follow. You've got to start at point A and then finish off at point Z. It no longer needs to be that way. They could start at any point. If they decided, well, I'm going to start with step number 5, if there is a step, they can then sequence their own learning. And that's really the nature of experiential learning, where the learner is in the center of the learning environment, and they then decide where they're going to start with that particular learning opportunity. Okay, so this is what I did with our grade 8 in 2015. So our school introduced Bring Your Own Device, and I wanted a way to showcase what the learners were doing to our parent body as well, and how they were using their devices. So something as basic as this, this was what you're looking at is a Word document, and I gave them this template in a Word document, and I said, with your device, go and take a photograph of yourself at your favorite place on campus. So that was a way of induction as well. I got to know the girls as well by doing so, and I really realized how they loved the school, etc. So that was one example. Then I asked them to create a QR code with a video explaining how they've used their device throughout the term or throughout the year, in different subjects. So the QR code was an interaction augmented experience where the video was simulated through the QR code as well. But this template I handed to the parents at our academic evening, and they could also then see, they had to bring their daughter's device and they could see what their daughters are doing at the school as well, using their devices as well. So it wasn't just about helping the learners, it was also to showcase to our parent body what we were doing in terms of devices and how we were using it in the classroom as well. So this is another way in which you could scaffold your learning, and there's lots of learning opportunities in this example. You could do how to take a good quality image and so on. I could go on for days about this. I really, really loved this template. So the last thing that I would suggest in terms of successfully implementing augmented reality in the classroom is to flip your classroom. And I mean, this is a buzzword that's been around for a while now. But how do you flip your classroom using augmented reality? And this flipping your classroom really is something that I struggle with, because you say, well, here's all the material, I've put it online, I've shared it through a worksheet, please go and visit these websites or whatever. And most of the time they just, the majority of your class comes back the next day and does not engage with the material that you've given to them. So it's quite a tedious process, but eventually your learners will get on, well, ma'am's actually not going to give us all the information. We've got to go and look at that information beforehand and then come to class with questions. And that also creates an authentic learning experience as well for your learners. So it's a lot of trial and error when you flip your classroom at the beginning, but with continuity and persistence, you can get through it. So what I do when I flip my classroom, I give them the information beforehand, whether it be online or just a handout with a whole lot of QR codes and things that I want to expose them to, etc., before I actually engage in the learning content. I normally ask certain assessment questions within the video, whatever the case may be, if I've created a screencast or whatever the case is. What have you learned by exploring the nervous system? Or what was the most confusing part of your geometry homework, or whatever the case is? I also like what-if scenarios, because you change the dynamic or the scenario with which they're learning that particular skill, or how you're enhancing that skill as well. And then lastly, designing in-class activities that resolve learners' misconceptions, misunderstandings, or difficulties with the flipped content. So using your flipped class experience and taking onus of the fact that your learners have engaged with that material, when they come to class, you could now say, well, what are some of the misunderstandings or misconceptions that you had about a particular concept? And that's when learning is so meaningful, and it's a lot deeper, because you're not dealing with surface level stuff. That has been covered already when they watch the video or they answer the questions that you'd like them to answer with, etc. So there's lots of opportunities for you to flip your classroom in this way as well. Another way in which I do it, I use Padlet as an example in my classroom as well. So I would give them information that I want them to engage with before a lesson, and I'll say the information is available on Padlet, but then I also make available a chat facility on Padlet where they could ask each other questions, and I don't get involved in it. They're asking each other questions, and most of the time, someone will stand out as a leader or as a moderator on that group and start answering each other's questions. So flipping your classroom, like I said, it's really worth it towards the end. So I've gone through this already in terms of preparing questions and the types of questions that you could ask when you create this learning opportunity. Okay, so using AR to flip your classroom, I said I would speak about different apps and so on that you could use. So what I've used quite successfully, even though there are lots of other apps out there that work probably as well, I used augmented reality app called Orasma. And Orasma for me just works beautifully. But you've also got to take into consideration in prepping your students as well. So if you want to use augmented reality in your classroom, first try it out by yourself and see whether or not you're able to use that application, etc. So what I've done in the past 2 years with our MELT program at our school with Bring Your Own Device, a month or so, I would say, well, please just be aware that we're going to be using Orasma in the next couple of weeks in class. So please download it on your device. It is a free app, etc. And I'll explain all those kinds of features to them. And I know our learners' requirements already about their hardware devices, but you could also tell them what sort of requirements are necessary in order to run that particular augmented reality app. And then lastly, once you've played around with that augmented reality app, demonstrate to learners how to use the app. And as soon as you do that with augmented reality, they're so excited because it engages them. Immediately okay, let's go and have a look at the homework that she set for us, or let's go and have a look at what this is about, etc. And that's a way of creating interest in your classroom as well. So those are the steps I would consider if you wanted to use augmented reality in your classroom. And then lastly, as I said, is to delve more into the misconceptions that they may have about certain concepts as well when you're flipping your classroom. And everyone, that's my 2 cents worth for augmented reality. I've really enjoyed it. It's gone by so quickly, Fiona. And so Fiona's going to tell you how we're going to share my presentation with you. And I hope that you've enjoyed the session and you've learned something from it. But I look forward to other webinars with you as well. Thanks for checking in today. Fiona, would you like to share?
Ronelle, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It was really very enlightening. To the viewers, I really apologize that we couldn't take some of your questions today. Ronelle and I just couldn't activate the Q&A for this Hangout, so I'm sorry about that. But I'm going to try and take you back to our opening slide now. I didn't see it a minute ago. Let me just go and have another look. Now, where would that be? This is our first time on Google
Hangouts, yeah.
On live, so we're struggling a bit. It hasn't shown up in my screen share, unfortunately, so I'll just have to tell you and show you on the SchoolNet blog. So normally when we have a...
Okay, it's come up now, Fiona.
What has come up?
Your blog, the screen share, yeah.
Now I'm trying to move around on the blog. Okay. So on our blog, we advertised Ronelle's webinar, and I'm going to create another post tomorrow with her presentation and the video of this presentation. You'll be able to access it by going to our blog, but if you can't see it there, we've got a large index, and I've made a label called Ronelle Klinck. Over here, there, Ronelle Klinck. But I've also, the other way to access it is in webinar recordings. So you'll be able to access this. Let me just stop the screen share. Now, Ronelle, thank you so much for tuning in and for telling us about augmented reality. You mentioned to me that you had a and that you're a director of another professional development program. Is that correct?
That's
At
correct.
school.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's called Tandawazi Teacher Development, and we focus on math, science, and the use of ICT as well in the classroom, and
Oh,
that's
wow.
something I'm really passionate about as well.
Wow, Ronelle. You're a person of many talents. Um, could you suggest any other apps other than Oresma?
Um,
I
yeah,
also love Oresma. Do you know of
yes,
any
yes.
others?
Yeah, so there's another one called Layar, which is also very good. It's spelled Layar, which is also
Okay.
fantastic. Yeah, and
Okay.
go and explore with things like Pokemon Go as well, and creating learning opportunities or experiences with Pokemon, because that's really something that's a buzz at the moment and very popular.
I know I've seen it all over the internet and
Yes,
I've been wondering about
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
So thank you again. I think I'll bring the webinar to a close. And I'm sure that you're going to present more webinars for us in the
I
future.
definitely will. Yeah.
So to our viewers, the next webinar will be on the 25th of August with Keshma Patel from Micklefield Primary. She'll be talking on expanding using Google Tours. Hopefully you'll tune in. But Ronelle, thank you again and goodbye, everybody.
Thanks so much.